All right. Hello, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us and welcome to today's session in our network's training webinar series aimed at building capacity for our network. My name is Ida Fernandez and I'm the Executive Director for Imagine SPOR. We're excited about today's special webinar called Gut Feelings on digital storytelling. And it's being led by Sandra Zielinski and Sadia Ahmed. But first, just a few housekeeping items before we get started. So please ensure to keep yourself on mute throughout the presentation so we can minimize the background noise. There will be some time allotted at the end of the webinar for Q&A. So we encourage you to type in your questions using the chat box feature at the bottom of your screen. And feel free to do so at any point throughout the presentation. And then we'll read them out for our panel at the end. Following the webinar, you'll receive a link to complete an evaluation survey. So please give us your feedback so we can continue to improve these sessions moving forward. The survey responses also allow us to track participation for those that are seeking CanMEDS credits. And finally, we do record these sessions and archive them on our website for future viewing. So please visit imaginespor.com if you'd like to share it with others who weren't able to join us today, or you can also check out our previous webinars there as well. So I just, before we get started, I want to introduce you to our presenters today. Sandra Zielinski is a graduate of the Patient and Community Engagement Research Program at the University of Calgary, a co-lead for the patient engagement researcher for the Imagine SPOR network, and a lead patient research partner for the Alberta SPOR support unit. Sandra attended her first digital storytelling workshop in 2018 at the Story Center in Berkeley, California, and she loved it so much that she went back to take their digital storytelling facilitator program in 2021. She's been living with Crohn's disease for almost 30 years now and has been working in patient engagement and patient-oriented research for almost 10 years. Sadia Ahmed is a research coordinator with the Alberta Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research Support Unit, the ABSPOR-U patient engagement team. She supports health researchers in developing their patient engagement plans, provides training and mentorship for patient research partners and researchers wanting to learn about patient-oriented research, and she conducts patient engagement evaluation projects. Sadie obviously co-facilitates digital storytelling workshops with Sandra as well. And I'm just, if we can move to the next slide, just give you a little bit of update of who we are as an organization. So the Imagine Network is investigating the interactions between inflammation, microbiome, diet, and mental health in patients with inflammatory bowel disease and irritable bowel syndrome. Our mission is to transform the management of IBD and IBS and the associated mental health issues with these disorders. And so part of our network's mandate is to increase awareness about these disorders and implement the learnings from our research into practical outcomes. So I'm really excited about this particular webinar as it helps us in achieving these goals. So over to you, Sandra. Oh, so before I mention that, these are just our disclosure slides, and Sadia has no conflicts of interest to disclose, and Sandra has received honorariums for consultation and speaker events from Takeda, AbbVie, Alimentiv, and Ferring. And again, for those that are seeking CanMEDS, these are the learning objectives for today's webinar. It's basically an overview of what digital storytelling is, how to review, we'll obviously view and reflect on the 6 digital stories today, and hear and learn from the storytellers and engage in a Q&A discussion. Now over to you, Sandra.
Thanks, Ida. So I'm going to talk a little bit and provide a little bit of an overview of digital story. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. We really do appreciate you taking the time to join us for this Gut Feelings IBD and IBS digital storytelling educational event, and we appreciate the support. And I also would like to thank the Imagine SPOR network for sponsoring this workshop, and for the Alberta SPOR support unit for supporting Sadia and I in doing this work. I would also importantly like to thank the storytellers, so Sherry, Sandra, Aaliyah, Robin, Ashley, and Megan and Kim, who aren't here with us this evening, for all their hard work, vulnerability, and courage in creating their stories, as well as for helping to put together this evening's event. So we will introduce you to them shortly. So we'll get started with talking a little bit about stories. So I'll just read out this slide. Our stories show and tell our relationships to experiences, inspiration, and ideas that have shaped us. The stories are a powerful way of communicating our experiences, emotions, and to help make sense of what we know. So we as humans connect and learn from sharing stories, watching movies, reading a good book, sitting around a campfire, etc. Storytelling is a human art form that teaches about human experience. We learn through both hearing and telling of stories. Everyone has their own unique journey, life experiences, and way of interpreting their unique lived experiences. Our hope is that by viewing the stories from the Gut Feelings collection, that we will reflect on each person's story and come away with new insights and understandings. These 6 stories that are being shared this evening were created in a 6-week online digital storytelling workshop, following a 7-step methodology created by the Story Center USA. I'm going to start off by providing an overview of digital storytelling and by talking about the importance of stories. So next slide. So what is digital storytelling? So digital stories are short 3 to 4 minutes, first-person video narratives that combines the recorded voice, still and moving images, sounds, and music. And who is a storyteller? A storyteller is anyone with life experiences, ideas, insights, who does not necessarily have experience in video production, but has the willingness to take part in a workshop environment to create their story using this digital media format. So virtually anyone. Next slide. So why I use digital story? Digital stories are self-revelatory and impactful. The stories often feel as though the author is aware of a new insight that is being shared, giving the story a sense of immediacy and discovery. Digital stories are personal reflections on a subject that are known to convey emotion in that the subject has deep meaning for the author. They are rooted in a lived experience from the author and are a description about a moment or a series of moments in time. They tend to use photos more than moving images to create a relaxed visual pace against the narration. One of the most important elements of digital storytelling is the use of one's voice to tell an authentic and meaningful story that the audience can connect to. They are stories that create intimacy, and because they're short, they're easy to share. Next slide. So how is all of this done? Digital stories are created in a small group workshop environment using hands-on experiential learning. We use story circles early on in the process, which are meant to provide supportive feedback and to help each storyteller in moving their story forward. We use straightforward video production techniques and provide creative and technical support throughout the workshop. These workshops can be done online or in person. So our group met for 2 hours of class time over 6 weeks, met weekly for 2 hours of class over a 6-week period. And Sadia and I also offered weekly one-on-one support to each storyteller. The storytellers had a little bit of homework in between each class. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get into a little bit of the methodology or the 7 steps of digital storytelling practice. So the 7 steps approach is a lens for recognizing and working with different ways of knowing, understanding, and being in the world. They are designed to encourage reflection, to think about our emotions, our key learnings, and to create a short but impactful digital media story. So if we look at the first 3 steps on the slide, owning your insights, owning your emotions, and finding the moment, the work is very reflective, and this can be the hardest steps to tackle. They challenge you to think about your emotions that you were feeling at the time of the event, figure out what you learned from your experience, and to discover the moment in time where there was change, whether you went towards change or change came to you. And then you describe all of that in a written 200 to 400 word script. And that's a challenge as well, trying to really condense it and have that impact that you're looking for, and leaving in enough details that that story is unique to you. So seeing your story is all about choosing the images and or short videos that will best reflect your story. In digital storytelling, we talk a lot about economy, so less is more. If you have too many pictures, the story starts to look like a slideshow. Hearing your story is all about the recorded voice. Each person writes their own script, then records their voiceover. Everyone's voice is unique to them, and it's what helps to make your digital story uniquely and authentically yours. No one else can tell your story with the same emotion and connection to it than you. This will also help the audience feel connected to your story. Assembling your story is taking all of those pieces of the puzzle and putting them together in a video editing software program. So this is a fun and creative process. Sometimes feels a little overwhelming when you're kind of new and getting a feel for the software program, but it also, once you sort of get a hang of it, is a lot of fun putting it together. So each digital story is unique and the creativity is endless. And you'll see that tonight was 6 examples that are all very different from one another. I won't go into the last sharing your story. Sadia will be talking about sharing your story shortly, and you will get to see the 6 digital stories that are being shared this evening. So next slide. So just finally, there are many ways that digital storytelling can be used. It can be used to raise awareness about a specific topic, for social justice, to advocate and impact policy change. It can be used in education, for community building, or simply for personal pleasure and growth. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Sadia, and she's going to talk a little bit about sharing stories.
Thank you, Sandra. So one of the things that we talked about within our digital storytelling workshop was the use of copyright free. So there's no such thing as copyright free books, images, music, video, or film. However, the storyteller's writing, recorded voice, and personal images, as well as their final digital story, belongs to them. And so we encourage the use of uploading what they're comfortable sharing. And if they were using any images that also featured other people within their lives, to obtain permission from those as well. We also encourage the use of using the WeVideo, which is a software that was used for the creation of the story, the stock images within that, if they were going to use any images or any audio recordings or any video files as well outside of their own. And that whenever they were using other people's media, so whether it be music, pictures, or voice, to get obtain permission and to add credits to the end of their digital story. We also want to highlight that these stories do belong to the person who created the story, and it is through a process of living consent that we work with the storytellers when sharing their story. So, for example, this webinar, we obtained the permission of our storytellers, and we will also be pausing the recording for the purpose of maintaining that privacy for within this webinar. And then those who have given us permission to share outside the webinar will share the links to their stories after the webinar as well. Now, the Gut Feelings educational event that we're hosting today, this was created to raise awareness about the challenges and stigmas of living with IBD and or IBS, and to foster this collaborative learning environment to support their telling of their stories. So we do want to tell you about this content advisory in terms of the digital stories may contain content that may be distressing or triggering for certain viewers, because some of these topics do center around surgeries, bathroom anxiety, medical experiences, and mental health issues as well. And so we do advise that you take care of yourself as a viewer. Please do feel free to take a break if you need to, or leave the meeting if you do find any of the content distressing at all while viewing the stories. And to maintain the integrity and safety of the storytellers, we also invite you to view and reflect on each personal story with curiosity and respect, to honor each storyteller by sharing words of encouragement, support, and some of your key learnings or insights in the chat box. So we invite you to ask questions within the chat box throughout the session. We have our team who are monitoring the chat box as well, and will ask those questions in the panel session following the viewing of all the stories. So feel free to leave questions as you watch as well, or hold on to them afterwards for the Q&A session. So I'm going to stop my slides here. To begin, I guess we'll go right into introducing our storytellers for the evening and to sharing the stories as well. Our first speaker or our first storyteller is Sherry Peng. So I'm going to read out her bio. She's an Ottawa native and public relations professional. Sherry has worked with the Crohn's and colitis community for over 25 years, running successful golf tournaments, walks, and cocktail galas. The Crohn's disease warrior is passionate about supporting those living with inflammatory bowel disease. Sherry's also a proud mom of 2 grown boys, a self-proclaimed margarita expert, and loves golf and paddle boarding. Recently, Sherry did move to St. Louis, Missouri, where she's learning how to navigate the American healthcare system. So Sandra will share Sherry's story with us today called Reflection.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us tonight. I actually haven't watched that for a little bit now, and it still kind of brings emotions to me. As Sadia mentioned, that I've been involved with the Crohn's and colitis community for a very long time, over 25 years, and I've shared my story hundreds and hundreds of times in just many, many different ways. To big audiences and persons, through media interviews, through letters and writings, and all kinds of ways. However, this was a really difficult time in my journey, and it was just something I really kept to myself. I didn't, probably because I get teary, so I never really could share it publicly. But when I started the digital workshop, I felt it was a really opportune time to tell this piece of the story. As Sandra had mentioned earlier, it was that moment in time that always stayed with me, and it's been a long time, so I was really ready to tell that particular piece. It was a very cathartic experience, I have to say, and I'm really, really grateful to Sandra and Sadia for guiding me through that process. So I've lived with Crohn's for over 40 years. So I was diagnosed at a time when there really was no awareness, basically, and we have come a long, long way in that aspect. But I know there are still people out there that really feel alone with their disease, and so I hope by sharing these, these very personal stories, it will help anyone going through a tough time, and to know that they're not alone. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity. So thank you, Ida and Sandra and Sadia and everybody involved. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Sherry, for sharing those words with us and for being here today, being so open and vulnerable with us. Again, thank you all for leaving your comments. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the chat. We'll address them in their Q&A after the viewing of everyone's stories. I'm going to introduce our next storyteller. So her video's on, so it's Robin. Robin is from Calgary. She lives with IBS and other physical disabilities. Her story is called Finding. And so I'll get Sandra to share her story. Thanks so much, Robin, for sharing your story with us today and being here. I was wondering if you'd like to share a few words, some key insights, or any reflections from your story.
Well, I just wanted to say that I combined some of the prompts that we had. And so I looked at diet and the people who helped me formulate the diet I have now. And the process I found was really frustrating. And so when I combine the prompts, I sort of come up with these different images and different resources that I was given and how I kind of dealt with it.
Thank you. And thank you so much for like going very creative with the story as well. Like I remember you had taken a lot of videos, a lot of images, a lot of baking to really show the experience that you've had. And so thank you for putting it all into it and being here today.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I'm going to introduce our next storyteller, Aliyah. Aliyah Abu Talib resides in Toronto, Ontario. She was diagnosed with Crohn's disease about 27 years ago. Her story is called Her. Thanks so much, Aliyah, for sharing your story with us. I was wondering if you'd wanted to share a few words or insights, reflections from your story.
Sure. First, I'm feeling a little emotional. I haven't watched that for a little bit. So for me, it was really important for me to talk about sorry, I'm emotional. My ostomy. I'd only been about 4 months out of surgery, and I'm now just 1 year, actually. February 3rd is my 1 year. And I've had Crohn's probably about 30 years or so, close to that. And I've never really felt like I've belonged anywhere. And as hard as it is to share these things, I feel like allowing yourself to be vulnerable and finding a community where you do fit is really important. So as hard as it is for me, and as hard as this journey has been for me, and as traumatic as the whole journey of my Crohn's has been, I felt like it was extremely important for me to share with people because, even though I feel alone, I know I'm not the only one who's going through this. And it was hard going through it, especially during COVID. Yeah, that's why I wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks so much for sharing your journey with us. Again, if you have any questions at all for any of our speakers, you can leave them in the chat. We will have our Q&A session following the viewing of all the stories. I'd like to invite our next storyteller as well to share her story. So we have Sandra Holdsworth, who is 58, lives in Gravenhurst, Muskoka. Sandra is married to her wonderful husband, Al, who's also been a great caregiver for her for years. She lives with a rare liver disease, PSC, and IBD as well. This month, Sandra will celebrate 26 years with her liver transplant, and she's had a permanent ostomy for over 10 years. So we're going to share Sandra's story now. Thank you, Sandra, for sharing your story, for being here today. Would you like to share a few words, insights, reflections about your story?
I think I'm feeling like the others. It's hard seeing that again, especially now. So I went undiagnosed with a rare liver disease that turned out to be primary sclerosis cholangitis for 10 years. 1992, when I was 28, I was told that not only did I have this liver disease, that I also had Crohn's or colitis. It was never really determined what it was, but so as I said, I had this February, I'll be celebrating my liver 26 years. And I've had my permanent ileostomy for 10 years. And I'm thankful for it. I can't imagine, like, I did live for 30 years with it, but it's so much easier than living with the pain of Crohn's disease. But I've been navigating our healthcare system for a long time. And, I've met many wonderful healthcare providers. And I wrote this about compassionate care because my doctor of 30 years retired in December when we were doing this. And so to have a 30-year relationship with a family doctor that would take a list and go through it with you and give you 20 minutes, to now have someone who's like, you got 2 items to talk and you got to be out of here in 10 minutes. It's very upsetting. I'm also known as a frequent flyer. So, basically what I'm trying to do now is to use my experience that I have gained helping to give back and helping other patients and things like that. So as we speak tonight, though, I am living with chronic kidney disease and having some issues with my liver. So, you know, it's a challenge. So my message is just to be more compassionate when we're dealing with patients. And I think I saw a comment from one of our healthcare providers, you know, and how we can work together as a team. I think it will be better for all of us all around. So thank you for the opportunity to share, and thank you to all the other fellows storytellers, because you really taught me a lot, and I appreciate that. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks so much, Sandra. Thank you for sharing those words with us. I'm going to introduce our next storyteller, Ashley. Her story is titled Super Bowel Sunday. So Ashley Patel is 26 years old from Brampton, Ontario, and she lives with Crohn's disease. Ashley was diagnosed in 2021 and underwent surgery shortly after in the same year. Her digital story is titled Super Bowel Sunday, as this day signifies what would be the most life-altering moment when it came to living with IBD, and what her disease outcomes would be, coincidentally occurring on Super Bowl Sunday, hence the play on words. Ashley is here with us today. Thanks so much for sharing your story, Ashley. Would you like to share a few words, reflections, or insights from your story?
For sure. First of all, thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to hear my story and hear everyone else's stories. Coincidentally, Super Bowl Sunday is also this upcoming weekend, so it's kind of the irony of being able to share this part of my story, and what kind of pivoted the course of what my disease would look like. And being that I'm actually now hitting 2 years as of this month since I was diagnosed with Crohn's, and being part of something like this, for the first time, I realized how impactful being a part of a patient-oriented exercise such as digital storytelling can be for the patient experience, especially when it comes to the overall landscape of how you feel with your personal self, especially your self-esteem. I know many of us storytellers can definitely resonate with the struggles that it comes with your mental health, whether or not it's going through surgery, waiting for a diagnosis. And I found that, I think that it's extremely uplifting, and I would encourage anyone who finds that they want to reflect on a personal journey and see how far they've come through and how far they've come from their own personal struggles. This is the right way to do it. And I'm really grateful to have met so many people living with this disease at all walks of life to share their unique subjective experiences.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Thank you for sharing those words with us. So our next storyteller is Megan. Megan Marsiglio is the founder of the Gut Gazette, a digestive health platform aimed at supporting people with bathroom anxiety, breaking the poo taboo, and inspiring self-advocacy. It's a community she started shortly after being diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 2009. Megan lives in Whitby, Ontario, with her husband and 2 daughters. You may know her from her Instagram at the Gut Gazette, or her website, thegutgazette.ca, which we can share as well in the chat. Megan is unfortunately not able to join us today in person for the webinar, but we'll be sharing, she has given us permission to share her story, and then we'll move into our Q&A with our panel of speakers or storytellers. Thank you. Thank you all to our storytellers as well as our audience here today for leaving your wonderful comments in the chat. So I'm going to invite all our storytellers to show their faces, and we'll hold a panel discussion about their experiences with the digital storytelling workshop, and their experiences in creating their story as well. Again, feel free to leave any questions you have in the chat, and we'll address it as we move on towards our Q&A.
So I'm just going to keep an eye on the chat box. Please feel free to add any questions that you have in the chat box for all of the storytellers or one in specific. If you have a question about one specific story. And we can start off perhaps just asking everyone what their experience was and maybe some key takeaways of taking the digital storytelling workshop and what that was like for you, what the experience was like. But anyone can feel free to jump in.
I can go. I think I kind of mentioned it a little bit. It's already a little blur of what I said because I was emotional. Oh, it's Aaliyah speaking. So for me, creating the story, like I mentioned, it was so soon after my surgery. So I'm sure everyone in the group remembers, it was hard for me. Just kind of like reliving the trauma that I was still going through. But I knew it would be therapeutic, which it was and has been. And it's just nice to see how far I've come as well. Because I was in it may not seem like it, but I was in a really, really dark place at the time that this opportunity came up. But in saying that, it was very therapeutic and really good for me.
Thanks, Aaliyah. Did anyone else want to share their experiences?
I can go. So we were given this question about people who had I don't know, causes grief, I guess. And we were walked through different parts of our story. Like it was like write out what you think that you want to say, and then we worked on it and we shared our story. And I think through sharing all of our stories, it was like, oh yeah, I had that experience, and there's this other experience I had that might tell the story a little better. So, and then we kind of played off each other's stories a little bit, at least I thought, to try and figure out, okay, so what was the turning point after all this trouble that we had, that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And so it was walking through those steps that sort of helps come to the conclusion at the end, because we all had to find a turning point to a 4-minute story. And we all had these giant lifelong stories that, I mean, how do you say 40 years in 4 minutes? It's like, what, 1 minute per year? Yeah.
It's a very good point, Robin, because I think, it's easier to write 2,000 words when you're trying to describe your experience of living with a chronic condition. And then to really hone in on the key messages and the insights and also being able to portray those emotions without necessarily saying like, I felt frustrated, and like in your story, that you can feel the frustration without you telling the audience that you're frustrated, just by you describing the details and the things that you're going through. You start to feel the frustration. You're like, oh my gosh. So I think, to sort of put it into that little short 200 and 400 to 400 words script is really a difficult challenge. It's one of the hardest parts, I think, of the process, is trying to hone in, get the key messages and insights in there with the emotion behind it as well. So well done, everyone. You guys all did amazing work. So yeah, thank you. And thanks, Robin. Did anyone else want to, I know there's a couple questions coming up here as well.
Can I just say something quickly? What happened? Sandra, did you freeze?
I think Sandra's frozen, but yeah, go ahead, Sandra.
Sandra froze.
Yeah, just quickly to answer your question, is that for me, it came, well, first of all, the opportunity, as I already said, is amazing because, having the access to this and having the access to the video. But for me, it came at a very good time, and it was actually very therapeutic. So not only to listen to the stories and say, oh yeah, I felt that way, or like to empathize for others as well. But because like a 30-year relationship with a doctor, like I walked out of her office in tears. Like I felt like I lost a best friend, or, you know, going through a divorce or something like that, like that I haven't experienced. But so to be able to then, so like as Robin was saying, like, what do you pick? What do you pick? And Sandra and Sadia were so great at, like, you know, what to focus on, because, you know, we could talk, like, I go, I should write a book, but then like, what's the most important message you want to get across? So I think that really helped, and having those opportunities to, you know, I think it was more like a little bit of a support group. That's how I felt during the times. And, you know, feeling for others, especially the ones that are a bit younger than me, like, you know, the one, like, you know, Ashley sharing about being diagnosed with Crohn's, and Aliyah just getting her ostomy and stuff. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so I remember a couple of questions. I got kicked off, and now my chat box is wiped out. So I might need a little help going back and grabbing some. But I think Irina asked about sharing this more broadly. So the Imagine Spore and AbSpore U will be sharing. Am I frozen? No, we'll be sharing the recording on the websites, as well as the links to the digital stories for the stories in which the storytellers have given permission to share. And then, yeah, you know, really, so we sort of came together as a group to plan this event. We could also, you know, talk about planning other events. That would be also up to the storytellers and what they want to plan. And then I think there was another question around, and we have Paul here, so this is great because he's a gastroenterologist and probably can answer the one question. I think it was Bree, so sorry if my memory's not right, but asking about whether or not women tend to be more commonly diagnosed with IBD and or IBS. I'll just one thing I'll have to say is women tend to take part in these types of things more than men. We did try to, you know, welcome some men into taking the digital storytelling workshop as well, but we didn't have any. We didn't end up having anyone. So women tend to like participate in these things a little bit more, and perhaps are a little more comfortable talking about the emotions and that kind of thing. So then I'll just maybe ask Paul, who's our PI for the Imagine Spore Network, if he wants to answer the more technical question about diagnosis.
So thanks, Sandra. First, I'd like to say this has been a great session, and it's very moving hearing all of your stories. Just re-emphasizes to me what an awful disease IBD is, and how much it affects people's lives, and how frustrating it is that, you know, people in general in Canada are just not aware of what people with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis go through. So to answer the specific question, actually, yes, it is slightly more common in women, but not much at all for Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, roughly equal. Yes, slightly more, but not much at all. For IBS, on the other hand, that is more common in women than men. We're not quite sure why. And to get to Sandra's point, if you survey the population, roughly 2/3 of people with IBS are women, and 1/3 are men. If you look at who's accessing healthcare, it's 80% women, 20% men, because men just don't go to doctors and are generally lazy and selfish. So this is why they don't participate in these sorts of things. It's also true that in the Imagine, you know, people who volunteered for the May Magic study in Imagine, we're nearly at 6,000, there are more women than men in that, significantly more. And this is, I think, a reflection of women wanting to help and men wanting to do other things. But what I will say is, despite that disparagement of men, people in general have been amazing in their support of this. And there was another question in the chat box, and why has Canada got the highest rates? And the answer is we don't know. It is something to do with the environment, and the further you are from the equator, the higher the risk of getting IBD. So there's got to be something in that. The only place that rivals Canada is New Zealand. And if you can think about it, they're sort of opposite ends of the equator. So, yeah, what's going on, I'm not sure, but Imagine is there to try and find out. Clearly, it's not just diet, although all of you have highlighted how important diet is. But frankly, the diets are not so different in New York, for example, compared to Ontario. Yet the rates are quite different. So it's hard to imagine that this is all diet. And probably the key factor is your gut organisms somehow driving this disease. Diet, of course, feeds into that. So I'm not saying diet isn't important, but I think the key cause is probably related to something in your gut that we all sort of inherit, but probably the colder the environment, at least in winter, the more likely it is that these things get transmitted. Quite what it is, I don't know. So I hope that's a satisfactory answer to the questions in the chat box, but happy to chat more if people want to in the chat box. So thank you again for this session. It's been wonderful.
Just on, it's Aaliyah speaking in on what Dr. Paul said. I'm not a doctor, but, and I don't have numbers, obviously men versus women, but my full brother has Crohn's as well. And we were diagnosed at the same time. And my father was diagnosed with colitis, I'll say about 10 years ago. And the huge difference between them and me is I follow up on my care. They're just like I guess the typical men. I don't really want to put it like that, but man, they wait to the last minute, and it's every story under the sun. So yeah, I think that's basically also what Dr. Paul's saying. They're stubborn, a little bit more stubborn, we'll say.
Ida, was there any other questions that I missed? Because there was a little chunk of the chat box that kind of disappeared on me. I know you sent the one that Bree had sent, but
I think we've covered them, Sandra.
okay. Do we want to just maybe we have about 20 minutes left, and I was thinking we can maybe even just ask each storyteller to share some of their key takeaways, and maybe the audience could also share their key takeaways, their key learnings from today, just in the chat box, and we can kind of just have a more of a larger sort of group discussion around what are some of your key learnings of whether it's specifically to your story that you want the audience to understand or learn, or the collection of stories, some of the themes that came from it that you saw, or anything along those lines. Does that make sense? And then, yeah, if the audience wants to share any key insights or learnings that they will take away from today as well, or any other questions you want to put into the chat box, feel free. Anyone want to jump in on that? Sherry.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Everybody's quiet tonight. Key takeaway. Yeah, I think you alluded to it earlier, like how difficult it was to, my case, 40 whatever it's been, 42 years of Crohn's. And I have gone through a lot with it. I don't even know how many surgeries, resections, temporary ileostomies, TPN. How many nights in the hospital, I have no idea. I couldn't even begin to count. So, you know, when we had that first meeting and it was like, okay, this story is going to be what a couple hundred words or something like that in a few minutes. And you're trying to find, you know, what is that moment that I'm going to capture from this. And that was, you know, it's just so interesting. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the creativity of the whole storytelling workshop as well and putting it together. One thing that sticks out in my mind when I was talking about my story and throwing up, I remember, you know, Sandra, I originally used the word throw up, but you know, I was throwing up feces, and that's just something that I don't tell anybody, but now you all know. And it was just such a personal, really obviously disgusting thing to you know, to think that I was going to share, but yet it was also, it's what happened, and it goes to the devastation of this disease. And you know, and I'm glad that I have now shared it, because I've since seen other stories kind of in Facebook posts and that, and you know, I'm not the only one that has happened to. So you know, I'm glad that I'm going to be able to talk about it now, as real as it was, you know, that it happened. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to share that part of it, and how much I enjoyed it all, and everybody's stories. And I think what I enjoyed as well is, you know, those details, especially about the hospital stays and the emergency rooms and the surgical rooms. Like, everybody captured this little piece that you could really, you know, resonate with, the cold beds, the, you know, the bright lights, the noises, just these little details that I really liked, that part of working together, and everybody's stories too. So anyway, that's me. Thanks.
Thanks, Sherry. Any other comments? And we can also wrap up a little bit early too. Sandra?
Yeah, I have a question. So I'm gonna call you Dr. Paul and not mess up your last name. But like, so we were talking about like IBD, male versus man, and I think, you know, the numbers are, but I think it's fair what's in the chat is that even with patient engagement, you find a lot of women that do it than man, or even trying to find man in research and that and stuff. But it's harder, I guess, to share some of the information as openly as women do, because like I was diagnosed with primary sclerosis cholangitis, and I'd be interested to know what the research is being done on the combination of PSC and IBD, because it's common. But when I was diagnosed, and I mentioned to you in the chat there, Dr. Fred Sable, he was looking after me for my Crohn's, but he said that PSC was very rare. And I kept being told, like, there was no information on it at the Liver Foundation, but I kept being told, well, that's usually a disease that affects men over 40. Well, now what we're finding out, the reason why they thought that is because men would finally come to their doctor with almost liver failure, and they were being diagnosed with PSC, right? Whereas now people are being diagnosed more earlier, because you have to realize this was like in 1992. So even Crohn's wasn't this diagnosed. I mean, it took me 10 years to get a diagnosis. So I'm just trying to point out like that, you know, it's the seeking care and how important that is. So, but it'd be also interesting knowing about this. It seems like a lot of us have what we call autoimmune diseases. And if we can figure out the autoimmune and the inflammation and this whole leaky gut and the microbiome and all that stuff, it'd be interesting, because I think that's, you know, what we suffer from. And I love the fact that you said that it's not diet only. And my thing you hear about is because, like, I did lose weight, but I could only eat carbs. I couldn't eat any fruit and vegetables. Or what's the other thing? Yeah, fruit and vegetables. So you gain weight, right? And though people go, well, you're not what I expected. You're supposed to be this skinny girl. Well, I've never been skinny, and I'd already lost 100 pounds, but I still was bigger. I've always been bigger, right? And so to be like, no wonder why you're sick. You don't eat your vegetables and stuff. So, it's very hard to hear that. So thank you for acknowledging that.
Thanks, Sandra. And then Ashley, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so I guess just to kind of close up and just tie in what everyone said about storytelling, I definitely feel like having the the privilege to be a part of this is almost like taking ownership of your own journey, because as many of you know, having this lived experience, you're in and out of the hospital. Some of these decisions that are being made for you, you're not fully aware that these decisions are being made for you, or you're not in the right mind space. So having the opportunity to kind of look back and reflect on, each specific moments that may have altered your perception of, how you were really in reality with your disease is extremely impactful. And I guess, having events like this, it definitely helps humanize the patient experience to, clinicians, aspiring clinicians, or people just in the healthcare space as well.
Thanks, Ashley. And then Aaliyah?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, first of all, I'm grateful to all the participants. Again, for me, I've lived with this unfortunate disease for a very long time. And I think, just going through it as well, I knew the toll mentally, emotionally that it takes on you, not just physically. And, unfortunately, I don't want other people to feel that, but, being in the group, you realize, and the more people you're around that are going through similar things, that, the toll that it does take on you mentally and emotionally, and the depression and the anxiety and the stuff that comes, and all the other disorders and ailments that come from it, adding on to the impact of the illness. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight all the extra factors that, can go into it as well for everyone suffering.
Thanks, Aaliyah. And then I just wanted to give Robin a chance. If you do want, you don't have to say anything, but I know everyone else has spoken. So if you want, and then we can sort of wrap up.
Oh, I was just noticing that somebody asked about vitamin D in the corner, and I never put anything about supplements in mine, but my doctors have had me on vitamin D for a very long time, and they've put me on iron supplements and potassium supplements, just because when you're using the bathroom that frequently and your bowel goes one way and then it swings the other way, you lose a lot of different nutrients just by doing that. And so it does affect your mood and how you react, and it becomes very isolating. And I think all of our stories relate to how isolating it can be, and how much information we don't have going forward.
Thank you, Robin. And I just want to, before I pass on the final words to Ida, I just really want to thank each and every one of you for your vulnerability. Your courage in sharing your stories is not easy to share these very personal stories in sort of this public space. Congratulations on all your hard work. And these are really important stories to share, like to raise awareness about these invisible conditions and diseases, and for others to learn about what it's like. So thank you so much for everything. And I'll leave it to Ida to close us off.
Yeah, so I echo the same message that Sandra. So thank you to our storytellers for putting all this work together too. I mean, this was as Sandra mentioned, quite an investment in time and obviously energy. And so thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for sharing your stories. And thank you to Sandra and Sadia for organizing and leading us in this workshop. Obviously, it's been a great learning opportunity for us all. And I also want to thank our sponsors, including CIHR, which has made funding for our network possible. And And of course, there was a lot of talk about, what it impacts and what causes these diseases. And of course, the Imagine Network's research study is all critical to help in trying to solve some of these questions. So as Paul mentioned, we have recruited nearly 6,000 out of the 8,000 goal. And so we're almost there. We're very much interested in reaching that goal and recruiting an additional 2,000 subjects, especially those with IBS and healthy people. So if you haven't already enrolled in the MAGIC study, please do. And I encourage your friends and families to join as well. And you can visit our website at imaginespor.com to find a recruitment center near you, and help us find better treatment options for people living with IBD and IBS. So thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great night, and we hope to see you in some of our future webinars. Thank you.